We're going to jump into part 2 of our series, Tap the Brakes. Everybody say, tap the brakes. There we go. Now, let me say this. One of the reasons we're doing this series is if I were to ask you right now to pick 5 words to describe your life, just pick 5 words to describe your life, I would put money on the fact that at least 90% of the room would say this. Busy. Like busy would make your top 5. Am I right? For sure would make your top 5, right? You're busy. You got plenty to do. You got sports. You got kids. You got work. You got chores. You got all kinds of things that keep you busy. And to compound that over the last, I would say like 15 years, the pace of life has just continued to get busier and busier. Am I right? You're feeling it, right? A couple of things I was thinking about this week. A few things, 3 things in particular that I feel like have increased the pace of every one of our lives over the last 15 years. The first one's this: inflation. Every one of us have felt the weight of inflation over the last 15 and especially over the last 5 years, which means that the pressure to work more, make more, do more only increases. So many of us are working longer hours. So many of us are picking up second jobs. For some of us, what was stay-at-home parenting is becoming what I call side hustle from home parenting, right? Like, as you just kind of like find a way to be present, but also to make up some of the income. I get that. Emily and I just made a decision not long ago where she actually jumped back into work for the first time in about 4 years at the time. The pace of inflation has driven the pace of our life in so many ways over the last 15 years and especially over the last 5 years. Additionally, over the last 15 years, this thing called access. I would say access has increased the pace of your life and mine. There was a day where getting a hold of you was really difficult. Like after 5 o'clock when your boss just couldn't walk down the hall and tap on your door, you know what I mean? Like you were literally gone for the day. You were out. Today, you go to bed with your email. You wake up with your email, and your boss, your clients, your customer, anybody who needs you has access to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I remember my first job out of college. I was working with this great organization, but I was there for about 2 months when my boss at the time found out that I didn't have a smartphone. He asked me, he said, hey, he goes, did you see my email last night? I said, no, I just got in the office. I haven't opened up my laptop yet. He goes, well, you have it on your phone, right? I said, no, man, I'm holding out. I've been holding out. About 2 days later, he showed up. He had bought me a smartphone. If that's not a message from your boss, I don't know what is. But you've got access, I've got access, and people have access to you 24 hours, 7 days a week. And what was a 9 to 5 is now a 24/7 all access situation for you and for me. It increases the pace of your life. Thirdly, I just say this: culture. Over the last 15 years, the way that culture celebrates pace, the way that culture celebrates busyness, we celebrate being productive. We write books about how to cram as much in as we possibly can into as little amount of time as possible so that you can have more time to do more things, right? Like we celebrate busyness, we celebrate pace. And with all of that over the last 15 years, I would say what was once a day off for you, in many ways has become a day of for you. A day of catching up, a day of shopping, a day of DIY projects, a day of laundry, a day of chores, a day of running the kids to that tournament or that game, right? What once was a day off has become a day of catching up, doing more. And it's not necessarily that you're not working, you're just working the job that you don't get paid for on that day, am I right? And eventually, you run at this pace long enough, you run at this pace fast enough, you do enough of this, and you and I both start to feel empty, right? Like you start to hit the wall. You start to hit the end of you. You start to feel like there's nothing left of you to give, even though life is demanding the same thing from you tomorrow as it did yesterday. And you start to feel empty. And your body, I don't know about you, but for me, your body starts to carry it, right? Like there are moments in my life where I start getting sick, not because I haven't taken my vitamins. You know, I start to get sick because I've reached the end of my body. And I've hit the point of exhaustion. There have been moments in my life, moments in your life, where a relationship starts to feel tension and starts to feel empty because you haven't had the margin to give to that relationship what it actually needed and maybe even deserved. At some point in life, you begin to just feel empty, drained, without any more to give. And at some point, we've got to find some type of rest and some way of rest. And I would just say this, the way that pace pushes us, the way that life keeps us going, if we're going to ever find rest from the pace, it's going to require a plan. Rest from the pace requires a plan. You and I need a plan for rest. I'd also say this about plans, right? The most reliable plans, are proven over time. The most reliable plans are proven over time. For instance, if you wanted to get healthier in your life, the most reliable plans, proven over time, pretty much can be distilled down to two things. Eat well, exercise. Eat well, exercise. Now, every once in a while, there's like a new fad diet or a new plan for that, right? It's like just eat brownies 3 times a day. And it's going to work. There's these very specific brownies that you need, right? And you're going to be good, right? But at the end of it, right, all of it comes down to eat well, exercise. Or if you want to retire well, if you're thinking about retirement, you want to retire well, any plan that you look at that's been proven over time, the most reliable plans are going to consist of a few basic things, right? Like spend less, save more. That's about all there is to do. Spend less, save more. Now, you can ride the wave of Bitcoin. You can jump into a get-rich-quick kind of opportunity, and sometimes those work. But sometimes they end miserably. But you and I both know this. The most reliable plan has been proven over time. And so it is with our time, and so it is with rest. About 12 years ago, I ran into discovered a plan that some people have been practicing for actually thousands of years to actually begin to find rest and renewal and recharging and rejuvenation and deep breaths, and quiet and pause in their life. And people have been practicing this for thousands of years, and I ran into it, and I began just checking it out, trying it out. Right? And here's what I'd say. Regardless of what you believe, this is a plan that I think is timeless and transferable. And regardless of what you think about it, right, I really believe it's timeless and transferable. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you the plan right out of the gate this morning. I'm not going to make you wait to the end, right? No build up, whatever. I'm just going to give you the plan. And when I give you the plan, half of you are going to be like, that sounds great. And half of you are going to be like, I don't know about that. But here's the plan. Let me just tell you this. It's take 24 hours. Put that up there, Sarah. Take 24 hours. There we go. To eliminate things that drain you and focus on things that fill you to the best of your ability, with rare exception, once a week for the rest of your life. Some of you feel like you just walked into a timeshare sales presentation in that moment, or Hotel California. You can get in, but you ain't ever getting out. Let me say this. This seems like a big plan. This seems audacious, right? It seems, I would even dare say, impossible. And I'll even say this. I've been working this plan for about 12 years. And in some ways for me, this plan is still impossible. And yet also in some ways, pursuing the plan has brought some of the greatest rest and peace and pause and renewal that I've ever experienced. The whole plan is rooted in this ancient practice that Jewish people have been practicing for thousands of years called Sabbath. Everybody say Sabbath. Yeah. Now, Sabbath is a Hebrew word that literally means to stop. Just stop, right? And so once a week, ancient Jews, and today even many practicing Jews, would pause at sundown one day a week. They would share a big meal together. Right? They sit down, they share a huge spread together. And then after that meal, they would just rest for 24 hours until sundown of the next day. And the whole concept, the whole thing for them, is rooted in the ancient Jewish account of creation. Many of you are familiar with this, but if you're not, right? In the creation account, there's this account, this story of the way that God is said to have created the world over 6 days. And then after 6 days of working to create the world, on the seventh day, he what? He rested. And the whole thing is built on that idea that comes from the ancient Jewish creation account. As if to say this, right? You and I know this. There are rhythms all throughout creation, right? We're in spring right now. It's going to be followed by summer. Summer will be followed by fall. Fall will be followed by winter. And after winter, we'll be back to spring. Yeah. Throughout all of creation, there's rhythm after rhythm. The way that new life comes forth, the way that new life hits being, and the way that life ends and the new life forms again. There's a rhythm and a pattern of rhythms all throughout creation. And the whole idea for Sabbath for the Jewish people is that also in the rhythms of creation is a rhythm of rest for you and a rhythm of rest for me. And it's a rhythm they feel like was given to them, and they said was given to them by God to their first leader Moses after they escaped from slavery in Egypt and moved into a wilderness area. They said God came to Moses, and through Moses gave them this plan and this rhythm for rest. Now, at the end of Moses' life, about 40 years after God gave Moses this plan and this rhythm, Moses knew that he was about to die. And there were a handful of things that Moses was concerned might not live beyond him within the culture of the Jewish people. And so before his death, Moses gathered the Hebrew people together, pulls them together, and he begins to remind them of all of the things, all of the laws, all of the rhythms, all of the rules that he had given to them about 40 years prior. And he reminds them of them and reminds them of why they're important. In the book of Deuteronomy, we get a snapshot, a look in on this reminder that Moses gives to the people about Sabbath. And he says this. He says, observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, which is a small way of saying, hey, this is a way that you actually create space for the presence of God in your life. And he says, as the Lord your God commanded you, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. He says, on it you shall not do any work, not you, your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your ox or your donkey or any of your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. Now, that's a long list of people and animals to make sure are included, but it's a long way of saying this. Basically, hey, rest is communal, not individual. Rest is actually a communal and even a family practice. I mean, you know this. If you choose to take a day off and stay at home and rest on the same day that your spouse decides to catch up on DIY projects, does that not begin to interfere with your day of rest? Or if you choose to take some time away and at the same time you're trying to shuttle kids to 3 different tournaments at the same time, on the same day, you might not be working, but at the same time it's also, is it not stealing a little bit away from your space for rest? Because rest is not individual. Rest is communal, and it's experienced together as a community and as a family. So after he says this, Moses goes on, he says this, and I think, I'll say this, I think the next piece of his reminder is the most likely to be looked past and breezed past and looked over. But I actually think it brings the most important charge and reminder and principle to us. If we would catch it, I think it would shift the way that we think about rest. He says this, he says, you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. He says, therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. In other words, hey, don't forget that you were once a slave. And remember what a slave is. How do you know this? A slave is an expense on an income statement. A slave is simply a means to an end, right? A slave isn't valued for who he or she is. A slave is only valued for what he or she can get you to or produce for you. In the same way, come on, that you and I can often make ourselves a means to our own ends, right? The ends of a bigger house, or our financial goals, or our career aspirations, or the things that we want for our kids, or our retirement, or that vacation that you've been dreaming about for 5 years, or our stuff, or more stuff, or bigger stuff or our career. And so often, if we're not careful, if you and I aren't careful, you know this, you can actually start valuing those things, those ends, more than you actually value yourself. And you in that moment become a means to your ends. And Moses is saying, hey, be careful not to enslave yourself again. Maybe for us, not to enslave ourselves to things like, come on, your calendar, right? Or your to-do list, or your bank account, or your DIY projects, which never end, I know firsthand, right? Or your career, or even your dreams, or even the harshest master of all. Come on, yourself. Don't you know, come on, don't you know that you are actually the harshest master of you? Just a few weeks ago, I was looking out the window where I work every day at the house. And I was watching every day the grass, it turned out, got like a little bit higher every day. And it turns out, like when it rains in the spring, that accelerates the process. And I kept looking out and looking out and looking out and saying, I need to mow the lawn, you know? I need to mow the lawn. And finally I said, okay, but first I needed to get a lawnmower because we just bought the house and we just moved here. And I hadn't run into this yet since we moved here. And so you know this about me if you've been hanging around for a while. I'm a little bit, I say frugal, others say cheap, you know, it just depends. Insert your word, whichever you choose, little Mad Lib. Right? But I don't want to go to Home Depot and pay, you know, hundreds of dollars for a lawnmower. I want to check Facebook Marketplace for a lawnmower and find me a nice used lawnmower, right? And so I'm doing that. And I learned after a few trials and errors that lawnmowers in the spring on Facebook Marketplace also go pretty quickly because it turns out I'm not the only person whose grass grew this spring. And so I realized I got to like respond quickly to these things. I got to move fast on these things. And so one night, I found a lawnmower that had been used, like the guy said, it had just been used a couple times, whatever. He said, okay. I said, hey, I'm going to try to get this lawnmower. So I messaged the guy. He messages me back. If you've ever like done the Facebook Marketplace thing, you know like timeliness is important to stay engaged in the deal and not lose it, right? And so he tells me, he goes, hey, I live in Champlin, and I can come pick it up tomorrow. Come pick it up the next day. Now, I don't even know much about Champlin on a map, and I don't even know if I'm saying that right now, to be quite honest with you, because I just moved here 6 months ago. But it's about 45 minutes away, right? And I go, okay, I'm going to do that. Well, we set up a time to meet, and I'm going to go meet him at 4:45 p.m. Now, I haven't really driven anywhere beyond, you know, Forest Lake and Wyoming and Hugo in the last 6 months. And I didn't realize y'all have this thing called traffic about 5 miles south of here at about 4:45 p.m. So I get in the car thinking this is going to be a quick jaunt over there to Champlin. And it turns out it's a 2-hour round trip. At the end of the day, soaking up my evening, right, to get a lawnmower. And I'm driving back and I'm sitting in traffic going, this was a terrible idea. Worst of all, it wasn't just a random Wednesday. It was my birthday. And I'm sitting in the car for 2 hours driving to Champlin and from Champlin, a town I don't even know how to pronounce, to get a lawnmower that I don't even know if it works, right? Why? Come on. Because I need to mow the lawn. Come on, how many of our needs, how much of our list, right, are expectations that we place on ourselves, that we create for ourselves or accept from others onto ourselves. Why? You know this. Why? Because you are often the harshest master of you. Now, the Hebrew people knew this, and they also continued to discover this as they lived out this practice and this rhythm of Sabbath. In fact, over time, the Hebrew people and their religious leaders began to add more qualifications for what a Sabbath or a day of rest ought to look like. They made more rules, they made more laws, they made more specificities that you had to meet in such a way that for some, what was meant to be a day of rest actually started to become, in moments, a day of extra pressure to live it out in a very specific way and to hit and meet a certain standard. And then far after this rule of Sabbath or principle of Sabbath was established within these people, Jesus begins, we find this in the New Testament, Jesus begins to walk the earth in this Jewish culture, and he himself practiced the rhythm of Sabbath. But at times, the religious leaders, the Jewish religious leaders, would challenge Jesus and challenge the way that he and his disciples, his followers, would practice this rhythm. There was a time where Jesus and his disciples are walking through a grain field on the Sabbath. And the disciples are hungry, and they start to just pop off the heads of grain and take a little snack, right, from this grain field. Well, there's a regulation among Jewish law that says you're not allowed to harvest grain on the Sabbath. And the religious leaders looked at this and they said, oh, you're popping a little grain head. You're taking a little snack. You're harvesting in this moment. And they come and they challenge Jesus on what his disciples are doing on the Sabbath. And Jesus said this to them. He goes, listen. He goes, Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. As if to say the Sabbath wasn't designed to draw something from you and put more weight upon you, but it's actually a gift that the Creator has given to you to lean into and enjoy and to flourish in. Shortly thereafter, there are 3 different times where Jesus actually healed someone on the Sabbath. And the religious leaders again come and they challenge Jesus. And they say, hey, Jesus, you're healing people. That's like work, right? You're kind of working on the Sabbath. I don't think you should be doing that. You should be healing people on the Sabbath. It's kind of the challenge that they bring to Jesus. And Jesus responds a few different ways, but they all kind of have the same tone. And they all kind of sound like this that he said one of those times. He said, which one of you who has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value is a man than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. So all of these religious leaders are coming at Jesus from a posture of legalism. Things you've got to do, you've got to get it just right. Don't mess it up in the slightest of ways. And Jesus is responding to them from a posture of love. Not to negate the law and the regulations or the rhythms, but to put a proper perspective around it. And to remind them, hey, this isn't something that was meant to be an extra yoke, an extra weight placed upon you. This is something that's actually meant to be a gift given to you. In fact, a way of your Creator, you might even say your best master, being so good to you, to give you permission to free yourself from the things that often weigh upon, and we might even say enslave you, and to take time and to find a rhythm to actually love yourself. Not the things that you're aiming for, but to actually love you as much as, or at least close to as much as, your Creator, your best master loves you. You might even say it like this. It's really simple. Your Creator invites you into a rhythm of rest. Not a rhythm of exhaustion, not a rhythm of finding the very, very end of yourself, not a rhythm of get as much as you possibly can get done, and we've got a break, squeeze a little bit more into that break, but a rhythm that was actually embedded in creation. A rhythm that was meant to sustain you through all seasons of our world and of our life. Your Creator invites you into a rhythm of rest. And the question for us is simply, will you allow yourself, will you actually give yourself the same permission to enter it? So here's my invitation for you this morning. Let me give it to you maybe in just a slightly different way. If you would, take 24 hours to eliminate the things that drain you and focus on things that fill you to the best of your ability, with rare exception, once a week for a month. If you look at that and you say, I can't do that for a month. For 2 weeks. If you look at this, I can't do 2 weeks. Tomorrow, and only tomorrow. No, come on. But take a moment, take a period, and actually allow yourself, just for a window, to enter the rhythm of rest that your Creator has laid out for you and that your Creator invites you into. So here's what I ask you to do before we wrap up. I want you to pull out your phone real quick. Just pull out your phone, wherever it is, if it's in your purse, if it's in your pocket, right? You probably have like 3 text messages to catch up on. You can catch up on those in like 10 minutes. Just let those sit, but pull up your phone. I want you to pull up the Notes app on your phone real quick. Pull up the Notes app. I want you to do this. I'm going to give you a couple of questions. And I want you to hypothetically, just for a moment, hypothetically pretend that you are actually going to let yourself, that you are actually going to give yourself permission to enter into this kind of rhythm of rest. Let me ask you this. I want you to write this down. What day would it be? Just write it down. What day would it be? Type it in there. What day would you actually allow yourself to enter into that? I'll tell you, when I first started pursuing a rhythm of Sabbath, which again, I don't nail near perfectly, but yet find joy and rest in pursuing. When I started pursuing that, I wasn't even willing to commit a date to it. I said, I'm going to go from noon on Friday to noon on Saturday. That way I can work on Friday and on Saturday. And you know what? It worked. It was more than I was doing. And it was a step in the right direction. We're going to celebrate the step, right? But what day would it be? Second, hypothetically, if you were to actually lean into this, what would you eliminate? What would you eliminate? For me and my family, one of the biggest things is technology. Because my email follows me everywhere I go. My text messages follow me everywhere I go. And so on Sabbath, my phone goes in a drawer in an office that stays behind a closed door. And I do check it at some rhythm just to make sure I'm not leaving somebody hanging who needs something from me, but I don't carry it with me. And again, I check it a few times throughout the day out of service to others, right? I know people who actually power their phone down for 24 hours. I hope to be those people. One day I do. I really do. But I'm not there yet. But what's it look like for you? What would you eliminate? Thirdly, what would fill you on a day like that? What would actually, if you were actually going to, again, hypothetically, if you were actually going to allow yourself, what would fill your tank? Is it a walk through nature? Is it time in Scripture? Is it a movie night with your family? Is it a game night with friends? What would actually fill you on a day like that? There was a time I was driving in the car with Emily on a Sabbath, and I told her, I said, hey, I finally figured out like the perfect ideal like Sabbath for me, the perfect list of things for me. I said, I've got it memorable. I've memorized it. I can remember it. I said, it's the 3 E's. She said, Emily? I said, it's the 4 E's. One of those moments, guys, those moments where it's very obvious we really are the dumber sex, like, there's no coming back from that one. She just looked at me, she said, that was bad. What would fill you? And lastly, again, hypothetically, when would you start? Maybe this week? Maybe next week? Is there a shift coming in your life in a month? You would start this in a month? Do you need to actually clear something to make room to actually just try this? But when would you start to try it? Because your Creator has created you for a rhythm of rest. The question for all of us, will you allow yourself, will you give yourself permission to actually enter into it? Let's pray together before we celebrate Blake's baptism. Father, I thank you for the ways that you have made yourself so available to us, that we could actually choose to trust you with the chaos and the craziness and the endless lists of our lives, enough to actually set them aside for a day or for a season or for a moment, and actually enter the rest that you've promised us and created us for, and trust you to carry all of those things for us. God, for those of us in the room right now who feel like this is so out of reach that it could never be possible. God, for the business owner in the room who never finds the end of a list of clients. Can I get that? God, for the mom in the room or the dad in the room who never finds the end of the list of things at home. God, would you show us what it looks like and how to actually take steps to give those things to you for periods at a time, 24 hours, 5 hours, whatever that step is. God, would you actually show us what the step would be to be able to make space, to rest in the ways that you invite us to, and then rest in the ways that you promise us that you will care for us as we set the weight of the world down, or maybe even hand it to you. God, we look forward to seeing how you work in our lives as we create space to rest in the ways that you invite us to. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.